up, party people? If you're watching this video, it's a theme on Jonah. You're probably subscribed to me or think that this is kind of like an interesting topic. I would like to know what you think a good tagline for my channel would be. Put down in the comments something that you think would be a good tagline instead of "What's up, party people?" or something like that, because I feel ridiculous with it, but I'm going to stick with it until I come up with something better. So in this one, we're talking about Jonah's posture in the entire book. So now that we've gone through the entire thing, I think that we can go through the posture chapter by chapter and see what's going on here. Because being nice and having an easy life doesn't mean that people are going to be good or respond well. In fact, I see in America right now that there are many people who have the easiest, nicest lives that you could ever have, and they're killing themselves in mass numbers. Anxiety and depression are running rampant, and that it is actually not a kindness that we are trying to live the easiest, nicest lives imaginable. It's just not working out well. God is faithful to his plan. There's all kinds of things that are going to happen in life, and I think that resilience, the military did a thing a few years ago where they tried to work on resilience, but they went the wrong way with it. They thought that resilience meant like dealing with nice, warm, and fuzzy feelings and stuff like that. And the military has always been really rough with suicide. Suicide has been rampant in the military for a long time. But it's just interesting to me because Jonah, we actually see that throughout this entire thing, Jonah's turning away from God, and God makes everything as nice as he possibly can for Jonah, and Jonah's attitude completely ruins it. So let's jump in. It's in the first chapter of Jonah. God says, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." But Jonah goes the complete opposite way, and we find out why later on. In chapter 4, he actually says, "O Lord, is this not what I said when I was yet in my country? That is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish, for I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and relenting from disaster." So Jonah, in a fit of rage, is complaining that God is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love? That he doesn't want to destroy the city? So Jonah knows that Nineveh, the Assyrians, are the enemy of Israel. They're a horrific enemy. But Jonah's attitude here is not one of compassion and grace, the same compassion and grace that's extended to him in chapter 2, when he's crying out to God, admitting that salvation is the Lord's, and that he needs God's salvation, that his prayer has to make it to his holy temple, that he's petitioning God to save him. That changes him for a little bit. It course corrects him to follow what God tells him to do, but it doesn't correct his attitude, does it? Arguably, the only bad thing that happens to Jonah in this entire book is being swallowed by the whale, which is a pretty horrific thing. Don't get me wrong. I don't know what that would be like to be swallowed by a whale, or to go down into a situation where you thought you were going to die for 3 days. I have no clue what that would feel like. But all the rest of this is like God setting Jonah up for success. And every single time, Jonah is mad about it. His attitude has been set from the beginning. He doesn't have the right outlook on this. He doesn't have a compassion outlook, which is the whole punchline, right, of this big joke of a book. Jonah is a joke. Like it's ironic, it's funny, it's witty, and at the end, the punchline is, Jonah, you were saved yourself, and you're not going to extend that grace to other people, and you're going to be mad enough that you would destroy yourself. So we see bitterness. It's another lesson on bitterness, where the best definition of bitterness, and I've heard this over and over, I'm not sure who said it, but bitterness is like drinking a gallon of rat poison and waiting for the rat to die. So Jonah is just filled with bitterness here. This idea that God teed up his ministry for him, it wasn't Jonah's doing. Jonah just did what God told him to do eventually, and he didn't even do that very well at the beginning. And there was nothing that happened. We think that Jonah is scared originally because if he goes to Nineveh, that he could die. The Assyrians could kill him. They could torture him. They could not like his message. They could kill him. So we think, well, that's a valid reason to be scared. We find out at the end that he's actually scared not for his own well-being, but that God would not destroy the Ninevites. And so this is an interesting thing as well, because his attitude is completely determining his circumstances in this. His circumstances really aren't that bad, like I said, apart from being swallowed by the whale. But there's a gospel application here as well for us. And one of the ditches we can run into is denying that we have enemies as Christians. So as Christians who are spreading the gospel out there, people need to know the truth. They need to know what the truth is, what God says the truth is. That's salvation. They need actual salvation. And so we see our enemies, and we have a ditch that we can fall into where we have no compassion for them whatsoever. There are issues today, the trans issue, the LGBTQ alphabet soup issues that are popping up, the worldview issues of postmodernism, and how epistemological issues of how do we define truth and what is truth. All of these things are issues that cause people to get very upset. Abortion is an issue. It's a political issue that's not really a political issue, but people take it as a political issue. You have political enemies. How do we have compassion as we share truth with these people? Because one of the ditches that we can fall into is adhering only to the truth with no compassion and not treating people as individuals, wishing the destruction of our enemies selfishly. That's not what God is doing here. And that's not what the point of the gospel is. The point of the gospel is reconciliation, is redemption, forgiveness and grace, and God's steadfast love. And the point of all of that is to glorify God. Not to glorify us, not to prove we were right. So if we get caught up in being right all the time, we're falling into a ditch on one side. And the other is to pretend like we don't have any enemies, or that we can coexist, right? These things tend to go into one of the two ditches. The thing that we need to do here is to lovingly present God's truth. And what Jonah, I think, very powerfully demonstrates is that you can be a part of God's plan one way or another, but your attitude about it, how you align yourself with God's plan, ultimately is going to, reflect what you believe about God. Do you believe that God is out there simply to destroy sinners? That's not the good news. So as we look at these issues that we may vehemently disagree with, whether it's the trans stuff, LGBT alphabet soup stuff, whether it's postmodernism, whatever the issue is, political issues, whatever, the Christless conservatism is a big issue these days. But all of these things, Christians are finding themselves with more and more and more enemies. And at the end of the day, we're not called to draw away our compassion, to put aside our compassion. We're actually called to show compassion in a steadfast way. And so I think that is a huge challenge these days that Jonah really points to. As funny of a story as it is, but I love that line, yes, I'm angry. Do you do well to be angry? Yes, I do well to be angry enough to die. So I think this is a cautionary tale. Jonah is a huge cautionary tale for people, especially if you are right, to take a step back and be compassionate to God's enemies, to enemies that are being brought up around you in culture and the world today. I think it's an exceedingly important time to keep God's compassion, grace, steadfast love, and the gospel, spreading the gospel is taking that message into the world. Because they've got enough hate, division, everything else. But I think that we need to be aware of that. So I think that's a big point in Jonah. So that's all I've got for this video. I've got a couple more theme videos for Jonah coming out soon. Like and subscribe. Let me know what you thought about this. Where are the enemies of Christianity popping up? How do we show love to them? Like and subscribe to catch all the videos as they come out. And I'll catch you soon. All right? Peace.